Good evening. Thanks very much for joining us on CNBC TV 18 special programming, Recharging Renewables. I'm Shereen Bhan. Today we turn our focus on India's renewable energy landscape. The government has set itself an ambitious target of installing 175 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity by 2022. Since 2013, the renewable capacity in the country has grown more than 80%, currently at 70,000 megawatts. So what exactly will it take the government to achieve its Vision 2022? Remember, issues like tariff cap at auctions, lack of standard guidelines for the bidding process, lack of strong laws to enforce that discoms don't violate the power purchase agreements are some of the issues that currently plague the sector. The Confederation of Indian Industries, that CII, has come out with a list of recommendations on how these issues and a host of others can be tackled. We discuss all of that and more in the next 30 minutes. Joining me, a power-packed panel: Rahul Munjal, the Managing Director of Hero Future Energies; Sumant Sinha, the Founder, Chairman and CEO of Renew Power Ventures; also with us, Ashish Khanna, the Managing Director and CEO of Tata Power Solar; and Prateek Agarwal, the Group CEO of Sterlite Power Transmission. Gentlemen, appreciate you joining us here on the program. Sumant, let me start by asking you, just a broad report card of where things currently stand for the renewable energy landscape. A lot of progress has been made, but the concerns now seem to be that are we heading in the same direction as we did with the power sector for the renewable energy sector as well? Are we looking at a situation where we are going to be left with stranded assets?
Well, the short answer, Shereen, is that we are doing reasonably okay. I think we've made a lot of progress in the last several years. The government was very ambitious and gutsy in some senses about setting the target of 175 gigawatts that you talked about earlier, at a point when our total installed capacity was only about 30 gigawatts. This is back in 2014. And we made substantial progress against that target. Today, we have 70 gigawatts now that are installed and commissioned. We have another about 15 gigawatts that have been auctioned. So about 85, so we're about half the way towards our target. And just looking at the momentum that we have right now, we probably should be getting to about 130, 140 gigawatts.
Okay.
Anything depending really on what the government does in the next couple of years in terms of further moving towards the target. So I think all in all, we've made very significant progress. Having said that, to answer the question that you just brought up, there are some concerns as well. And those concerns are particularly dealing with the low tariff situation that we are finding right now. The difference between us and the conventional sector is that a lot of the stranded assets that took place in that sector were as a result of either PPAs not being there or fuel supply issues. Now, those are problems that don't really plague our sector, because obviously we only install projects once the PPAs are in hand. And fuel obviously is not an issue in our sector.
But a violation of PPA is a concern. So while PPAs may be in hand, is a violation of the PPA, the contractual obligations, a concern today?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I think categorically I would say that none of the discoms are talking about cancelling any of the PPAs. And I think any talk in that respect is alarmist in nature, and it's actually not accurate at this point in time, because no single discom that I'm aware of is looking at cancelling any of the older PPAs. These have all been bid out. Most of them have been auctioned off. They've been allocated through a transparent mechanism. And therefore, there is really no reason to go down any path in terms of looking at moving away from these PPAs. So I think the PPAs are strong. They're solid. As I said, there is no fuel risk issue. So I think at best, some of these projects may end up giving lower returns for some of the people who might have bid very low tariffs. But I don't see any stranded assets getting set up. I don't think that is an issue in our sector, at least.
So not an issue just yet? Would you agree with that? That we're not looking at that possibility just yet? But if some of the concerns that have been flagged by industry are not addressed, could that be the eventuality?
I think, like someone said, if you have ultimately it's a utility business, you have an asset, it has its PPA secured, the fuel is dependent on the weather, not on individual companies. I don't believe that there could be stranded assets to the size and tune you saw in coal. I believe, yes, as always in the case of auctions, there will be the one odd bidder that is too aggressive, and that asset could go under. But I don't believe it will happen to the magnitude that you've seen in thermal or any other sector.
So what's going on as far as auctions are concerned? And Rahul, let me ask you that question, because in total, 3,900 megawatts of solar auctions have been cancelled between January to November of 2018, and only 1,000 megawatts have been re-tendered. So what exactly is the problem? Is it again back down to tariff?
So, absolutely. So let me just talk about that. You know what's happened? We all loved for the tariff to fall from 5 to 4 to 2.44, which was great because, at low solar tariffs, solar becomes, or wind becomes, renewables becomes mainstream energy, and everybody wants to buy it. So we like low tariffs. But then what happened? Government went and capped it at that. At the same time, the interest rates went up, rupee depreciated to wherever it is now, and other than that, we got safeguard duty for 30%.
Yeah.
So all that put a pricing pressure. So 2.44 for a project which was done 8 months back is very different than a project that we're bidding out today at 2.44. So I think the cap that they put is not good for the industry at all. And some of the players who are bidding is extremely aggressive.
Okay, but you know, this is a recommendation that you've all clearly made to the government that remove the tariff cap, but so far it hasn't found much resonance within government. If this were to continue, what is the outlook then as far as being able to achieve that, 2022 target?
See, Shereen, if you look at it, as on date, everyone is bidding, and everyone has also been bidding very aggressive. But when we are looking on a long-term perspective, yes, it could be the impediment on that stage. As on date, there is a cap which has come through certain calculations which are going through. But it is not right to first have a cap and then have a reverse auction too. You know, generally, you have a feed-in tariff as a regime. So the industry is looking for a feed-in tariff which can be given, or there is a reverse auction process which can go across. I think the calculation of the cap and using that calculation then to have further lowering the tariff is a system which has been utilized by the government, which is working so far. You know, at the end of the day, the industry is still bidding. The only point is some of us are going overtly aggressive. And that is where we have to see...
Who are the some who are going overtly aggressive? Let's name names.
Everyone... See, let's understand that anyone who is bidding has certain assumptions in it. You are based on certain assumptions for the next 25 years and for the next 2 years when you are building the project. There is assumptions with respect to the foreign exchange. There is assumption with respect to the inputs cost, which is coming across. And a lot of it is coming on the imports. On those assumptions, everyone is then bidding. Till date, if you look across in the last 23 megawatt, which has already been under operational, there is nothing which has gone wrong. However, having said that, we are looking for another 4 times of it. Why don't we have the maturity level and then work as an industry which is more mature?
Okay, there's been no accident yet, and perhaps that is why the government says, what's wrong? Why shouldn't we continue to do as we have done and, keep the tariff cap? Because at the end of the day, we want to benefit the end consumer. We're not here to try and benefit the private power sector.
No, I think there's more reason to be optimistic. I think we are looking at the last 3 or 4 years. And if you take a step back, the next 3 or 4 years of the power sector will look different for several reasons. First reason is if you look at the power consumption growth in the month of October, it's 11% year-on-year growth.
That's right.
Some states, non-election states, have grown at 30% year-on-year growth. Right? This hasn't happened in 2 or 3 years. So when the sector is improving and more power consumption is happening, I think that opens up doors for everybody in the sector, including perhaps for the government to say that some time ago, 2 rupees 40 was my cap, but maybe 2 rupees 80 could be okay, as long as power consumption improves, right? And more people are willing to pay a little bit more for power. And peak prices touched some 12, 13 rupees recently, right? So I think we must remember that the last 3 years were definitely so-called bad years for the sector, close to 0% growth in some years, and that's changing almost dramatically in the last few months.
Okay. Are you as confident or as optimistic? Do you believe that we are going to see a change in the dynamics purely because we're seeing demand go up?
You know, we have to make sure and ensure that this carries on for a little bit longer. I think if power demand continues to grow over the next 6 to 9 months and perhaps even a year, I think that will bring in a different level of confidence. Right now, the issue is that everybody is factoring in 4 or 5% growth. Discoms are procuring on that basis. They're making their plans on that basis. And so, yes, if they feel that there is going to be more growth and therefore they have to start procuring more, that is going to change their mindset. So that certainly will be a very significant underlying change if that begins to happen. And that will therefore lead to all boats rising on the tide. I think, having said that, there are a number of other things that need to be addressed in the power sector as well. And in the CII recommendations that we've given to the government, those are the things that we've talked about as well, which is that, first of all, the grid needs to be really improved because you can't actually have a grid which is operated in the way that it is today and have more than 15 or 20% renewables getting fed into it. You need to actually expand the ability of the grid to absorb more power. You need more transmission lines. You need better software to manage the grid. So that is an area that the government can really work on without really impacting any of these issues that we talked about earlier, which is around pricing and so on. So those are neutral issues that we really need to focus on a lot and make sure that enhances the absorptive capacity of the grid to take on more renewable energy. So that's one thing that we need to work on. The second thing that we can work on is things like demand-side management, moving more and more of the consumption towards renewables. For example, the solar pump scheme that the government is thinking of coming out with, that's a very significant change in terms of trying to move a lot of the demand from the grid directly into the solar sector at a distributed level. So like that, there are many other interventions that can take place, which can also look to modernize the grid very substantially, look to green the grid very substantially, and which are not controversial in nature. So there are quite a few things that the government still can look at doing.
Okay, so you're talking about the neutral interventions, the non-controversial interventions that you believe the government should take. But Rahul, let me come to you and ask you about prioritizing for us the immediate interventions that are required. I think tariff cap, there is consensus on the panel that perhaps is topmost of the industry's agenda, whether or not the government does anything about it. So far, no indication that it will. But in terms of priority, what are the interventions that you speak?
Yeah, so there are a few other things that the government needs to do. I want to first clarify, most of the things in renewables are still preemptive. Whatever you're talking about for the thermal sector, it's not all doom and gloom. What we're saying is we have ambitious targets. Let's get there. And this is what we need to get there. So the sector is not going anywhere. The sector is here to stay. It's got healthy growth. But our targets are very, very ambitious. Having said that, one of the biggest elephants in the room is the DESCOM health. And even the Electricity Act, the bill that's there, that talks about carriage and content separation. So let's get that bill in. As soon as the next government comes in, whenever the government comes in, I think one of the first priorities would be to make that an act, because it's a very well-written act. And almost everything gets covered there.
This takes me back to the interview that I did with the now Power Minister when he took office, and he said that this was going to be his priority and he would get this done immediately. And, it's been, more than a year now, and there is no indication that it's going anywhere. So let's see whether that does, in fact, go through.
Absolutely. So that's one of the things that we'd like to see happen. And something that's irritating most of the players today in the industry is the payments are due from DESCOMs. And they're getting due much longer than they should be. We've gotten used to 30 days, 45 days, 75 days. It just keeps on extending.
What is it currently?
It depends. There are certain states which are really good, where it's online.
What would the average be?
I would say average would be about 4.5, 5 months today.
4.5, 5 months?
Yeah.
Well, on that note, we'll take a break, but when we return, we continue our conversation on how we can recharge the renewable energy sector and address some of the pain points it faces today. That and more when we return.